Imagine expanding your team's abilities without adding headcount. With Element 451, AI assistants like admissions advisors and student success coaches work alongside your staff to deliver personalized experiences at scale, offer round the clock support, and uncover data driven insights. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing it smarter. Elevate your team with an AI workforce that delivers personalized, scalable, and impactful experiences across the student lifecycle. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, to another super special live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, recorded live here at Transact 360 in Las Vegas, Nevada. So I'm super excited to be invited here, recorded with a bunch of folks. This is my third interview, if you're following along. And this is a treat, both because it's an in-person interview. I love getting the opportunity to do this, but I've also never talked. It's crazy to me when I realized this. After 7 years and over 250 episodes, I've never talked to a Bursar, somebody from Student Financial Services. So we're bringing that perspective in. Really appreciate you, Pat, for jumping on and being a part of this. But if you just want to briefly introduce yourself, your title, and what brings you to T360.
Thank you, Dustin. First off, nobody on campus wants to talk to the Bursar either. So you are not alone. So
I don't believe it.
I'm honored to be the first Bursar on your podcast. My name is Patrick Beirne. I am the Senior Director of Bursar and Student Financial Services at Wayne State, located in Detroit, Michigan. We are a campus of about 24,000 students, a large urban R1 institution in the heart of Detroit. So, it's exciting. Great to meet you, and thanks for letting me be on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to clarify, is this your first T360, or have you been to any of these before?
I came to T360 last year. So Transact has been our integrated payments partner for over 20 years at Wayne State. And I've been at Wayne State for 6 years. And in the time that I've been there, we have leveraged more and more services with Transact and just really cultivated that relationship and took on more and more solutions. And as we've done that over the last couple of years, I think it's great to come to this conference and really be here at the forefront to see what Transact is doing strategically and what we can, do to make the student experience better at our campus.
Yeah. And I was realizing because this is all very sort of core systems, for an institution. I've been to some other user summits that are more kind of tertiary, maybe, student success or engagement or other things. So, it's been interesting to be here. And it's just kind of a different vibe and just sort of who all the different partners and stuff that are here. But I feel like I have to do this just because you are the first Bursar. It's a unique title, we'll say. But what sort of in kind of a quick snippet, how would you explain your role to somebody who is just sort of what is a Bursar?
So the word Bursar is a Latin word. It's a Latin word, collector of the purse. And what the Bursar does at a university campus, the Bursar is responsible to bill and collect institutional revenue. And that's tuition revenue, housing revenue, some auxiliary revenue. So it's our job as a Bursar to make sure that we efficiently and accurately bill all of that revenue and that we collect it. So it's both sides of the billing and collections. And Yeah, it's an important role. The financial health of the institution. It's really important to turn revenue into receivables back and then into cash, and that's the role we do as a Bursar department.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, probably maybe a lot of people are familiar with like accounts receivable or payable, like that's just like, it's just different vernacular, it's like nothing to be afraid of, the Bursar. But yeah, and I mean, obviously, yeah, like it's the idea of like a core service, something that's going to be, having every student sort of touch, your office in some shape or form, and certainly any more, digital transformation, just in terms of, all the stuff we're talking about in these interviews here is going to be looking at it through a lot of different lenses. But appreciate you kind of bringing the perspective of, student payments and billing and everything. So how are you seeing digital transformation impacting student payments and billing?
Well, I think it's consistent with what we see in the payment space and other industries. It's less cash. People don't use cash as prominently as they used to. And we see that in higher ed. The percentage of transaction volume that is cash at Wayne State is now less than 2%. And there's all these different payment mechanisms that, this generation of student prefers, and cash is not one of them. So that's a big trend, and Transact really is a great partner to be able to expand our offerings for students to be able to pay in the means that they prefer. So following those payment trends in the industry, it's just consistent with what we're seeing on campuses.
Well, and I guess even just like where my mind went is like, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, I guess, but like the idea of like that you are interfacing with folks that, students who are, making like tuition payments, these large payments. And of course, obviously, we're not presuming that anybody's paying that straight cash, just sort of like bring a suitcase or whatever. But like, there you have that sort of whole, side of the house, I'm sure. And then like, yeah, just the like day to day, the bookstore, the coffee shop that's, in the student union or something, like it's all those things, like the just like Apple Pay and everything else. It's just like there's been, such a like paradigm shift. And certainly, yeah, I mean, that's like a very indicative metric where it's like cash is like so low, and then it's just like it's everything else. Yeah, you could just be, swiping a card or, just beeping your phone or doing whatever else. Like it's just this whole sort of like, digital wallet ecosystem has really, expanded so much in the past several years. And the idea of, yeah, like institutions need to be as responsive as they can be for, because I'm even thinking, I guess, so like this, I'll put this to a specific question. The idea that like, even for something like, oh, I need to pay my tuition, integrating Apple Pay into something like that, is that something that you have done or have thought about or like had gotten feedback on or something?
Yeah, we have to really ensure that there is access and ease into the payment experience, and not just for students, but there's the payment ecosystem in higher education is so broad, and it's just so critically important to make sure that the access to make payments, the ease of making payments with all the different mechanisms that are preferred in the space, it's so critical that we are really on top and really following the trends in the larger marketplace. So to answer your question about Apple Pay, yes, that's something that we are looking really closely at because it's something that I think Generation Alpha, I think that's a preferred payment method.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just the more varieties that we can offer to students and payers in their payment experience, I think that's really, really critically important. And especially because the cost of higher education, it's a high cost. And, you want to make sure that you provide as much ease into that payment as you can.
Yeah, because it's what I'm thinking of is that like when you're on like, a web page, whether it's on your phone, your computer, or whatever, is the idea that I think increasingly people, it's like, I don't always just like have my physical cards with me to like input all the numbers. Like I have it all saved in Apple Pay, certainly to be able to just, beep and pay at like a cash register. But then it's even like just when I'm shopping anywhere, doing any sort of like financial transaction, increasingly, yeah, people are expecting where it's like, no, because I have all my cards in Apple Pay and I want to see that button and just do that because it makes it super easy. But the other thing that I thought of, I feel like you were kind of alluding to, is even the idea of like, students is certainly kind of the primary constituent stakeholder. And, you have like sort of your, campus app and, cards and everything that students can use, but campuses welcome a lot of like friends and family and people. So it's like, they obviously have their own expectations and they don't have the student ID card. So you can't like be overly beholden. It's like, well, we have our thing. Like, so like everybody can just do it on there. We don't need to necessarily, kind of do all the things for everyone, but at least being mindful of like, well, we're gonna have a lot of other people here too. So we maybe do need to have some, for certain things, like where it makes sense, where those people maybe would come into, the sports stadium or whatever else, like, maybe at least like, have different kinds of options for payments there, because it's like, we're welcoming so many other external folks. So
yeah, and in addition to the options, the digital security, in higher education, our core competency is education, research. We need to rely on the experts in the payment space to help us ensure a secure payment experience for all of our students and payers. And that's, as you start to expand with all these different kind of payment mechanisms, it's really critically important that they're secure. It can be trusted, and having partnerships like this with Transact really helps us achieve that. When again, as leaders in higher education, we're educators, so they kind of help really take that burden for digital security and help us master that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Hey folks, it's Dustin. Quick break for anyone thinking about what AI really means for higher ed. The next step isn't smarter tools, it's a smarter team. Imagine support that never sleeps, that helps in 100 languages, answers at midnight, follow-ups before morning. That's what a digital workforce brings to higher ed, and it's already happening with Bolt agents from Element 451. Come see it live at the Engage Summit this June. Register at enrollify.org/engage and use code ENGAGE50 to get $50 off your ticket. Now, back to the show.
Well, when I was thinking about things to speak with you about, this one can't really elegantly segue to it, but I'm really curious on your thoughts of like, the work of things like integration, centralization, like maintenance. They may not always be at the top of folks' minds when they're like developing their digital strategy, but they're obviously very important. What to you makes these types of efforts really important, especially when it comes to like, financial and student account systems and all those sort of things?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I'll start by saying that higher education is an industry that does not like change. There is a resistance to this is the way we've done it in higher ed for a long time. But the reality for us in this industry is that there's an enrollment cliff coming in 2026 that people are very familiar with, that the population decline from the housing crisis in 2007, 2008 caused a decline in population, and that's about to hit higher education. You take that issue of the enrollment cliff, and then you couple that with the cost of higher education, and is Gen Alpha, are they valuing a college degree like earlier generations? So there's less and less potential students. There's a question of value of a college education. So it's becoming more and more competitive. And in this competitive landscape, you have to be at the cutting edge technologically, because that is what students demand. And if your campus is not offering the highest technological capabilities for them, another campus will. So it's very competitive. It's critical that we as an industry really, really stay at that cutting edge.
Well, yeah, because I think what I'm hearing is like, a kind of laundry list of like terms, like integrations and all these sort of like, all of that is descriptive or indicative of a like modern student experience, digital experience for a student, is that like, everything is seamless. It talks to each other. Data is being kind of, free flowing. And because like, they're going to be using a lot of different platforms for all the things they do as a student. And, there's just good like single sign-on or ability for staff members to, see what they need to when they need to, things like that. And I think, the idea of like continuing to even do like the maintenance and everything, because I think what a lot of us now experience is like with all of our various apps and different things, like, they're always just pushing new updates. They're always like, fixing bugs and all that kind of stuff, versus just being like, well, this is the platform we've used forever and it's fine. It works well for us. That's usually like kind of the mantra or sort of the point of view is like, well, it works well for us as like faculty, staff, and, the administrators and everything. And they're not really doing the work to make it obviously a good user experience, but also like addressing feedback and those sort of things. Like you want to even if it's the idea, I feel like of like just being mindful of those things. And if it is like, again, we'll just use it as a good example of like, Apple Pay or something. It's like, well, we are integrating it over here, but we're not over here. And this is why, like, we understand, like, we know, what's happening. We're aware of like, some of these like trends and things, and we're being thoughtful about like what we are doing, what we're not doing. And, the prioritization of the, that sort of thing, I feel like is like, yeah, again, like indicative of just sort of an institution that is sort of embracing a very good sort of modern, digital experience. So I guess curious your thoughts.
It's absolutely. And I think another challenge is the fact that higher education by design is just so siloed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to look at the lens of just a complete integrated ecosystem that everyone in that ecosystem of payments and just kind of all a shared vision. That's really hard to achieve because of how siloed higher education is. And I think here at this conference, I'm excited to hear Transact. They're talking about that centralized ecosystem and bringing that to campus. And I think as an industry, we need that, again, because of the competitive landscape of institutions that are really competing for less and less students at a lower perceived value, perhaps, with other accreditation options out there that, the Googles and Amazons of the world are developing. So, yes, I think it's, really, really important to be mindful of, just that shared vision.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up, asking this question to everybody. So absolutely curious. Your take, again, is very unique, kind of representative here. What are you watching on the horizon when it comes to your work? Like, what should higher ed leaders be thinking about right now? We
have to be adaptable, and especially now, more so now than just a short while ago, because, this landscape, it's literally moving daily. And again, as I said earlier, higher education does not like to change, but the challenges, political, social challenges is kind of, forcing higher education to be really, really adaptable. And I think that's really, really critical to really kind of navigate the landscape right now.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you sort of ending on that note, because that feels like with everything that you kind of shared and talked about, is like, that's sort of the call to action. It's like, you need to be adaptable. You need to be, responsive and, sort of flexible and those sort of things. Like, because you may not be able to fully predict what's happening, but if you're just in a place where, cause I guess it's even the idea of like applying that sort of philosophy to how you're building your tech stack. Like, are we getting things that, integrate well with one another? And, cause like that would allow us to be flexible. And so, yeah, I think it's a good call to action. And yeah, it is, like you said, like, to put a sense of urgency around it too. It is like, we are just increasingly seeing sort of the winners and losers in terms of institutions that are like, having to make huge budget cuts or merging and closing and all that, because they're not, it's not the sole reason, but it is, I think, a bigger one is that, like, if they're not creating a really strong kind of user experience for their students, which increasingly is the digital experience for their students, because they're hitting, points of friction and everything. And certainly it's like even just minimal friction at times is enough to just like be like, I'm not going to like, pay my bill or do whatever else, because it's like, it's too hard. I'm not going to, bother. So I think, really important stuff to be thinking about, and really appreciate you hanging out and sharing all that you did. And just appreciate the time here at Transact 360.
Yeah. Thanks so much. It was great talking to you, Dustin. I appreciate inviting me on. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly in your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.